I'm in the airport, so there may be some loud announcements here, but we're going to go ahead and go through these study designs here. So here is the beginning of the Stanley study designs. The first one that we're going to look at is the one-shot case study. Stanley and Campbell say it's completely useless for scientific purposes, and it essentially we study one group. Or we give treatment to one group, and then after we do some type of observation after the treatment. And so the notation on this is pretty simple. It's just X for treatment and O for observation. Okay. The next one we have, which is number 2, is the one group pre-test, post-test design. It's pretty straightforward, exactly what it says it is. You have one group. You will give them a pre-test on something, give them some type of treatment, and then a post-test that measures the effect that treatment has. And so the notation is simply observation, or this can even be O1, X for treatment, and then an observation afterwards, and O2. The next one is the static group comparison. So this is where you have one group that will receive a treatment compared to another group that won't receive a treatment, and people are not randomized into those two groups. Okay, it's still a pre-experimental design within this framework. The notation, because there's no pre-test in this, it's only a post-test or observation at the end. You just have the X for treatment, and then O1, and then you have a dashed line to let you know that the groups are not randomized, and then you just have an observation at the end of the other group. There's two separate groups there. One receives treatment, one doesn't, and both are only observed at the end. Okay, and that one's the static group comparison. All three of these are pre-experimental designs. Okay. After this, we move into what he calls true experimental designs. Okay, and the first one of these comes up as it's number 4 in Stanley and Campbell, and it's a pre-test, post-test control group design. Okay, so within this design, we'll have two groups here. All right. The R stands for people being randomized into each of the groups. Okay, there'll be an observation at the beginning for each of the groups. One group will receive the treatment, and then afterwards there'll be another observation to see what the effect was. Okay, pretty straightforward. Randomization, pre-test, treatment or no treatment, and then a post-test. Okay, and just so I'm not confusing people here, observation is used interchangeably with pre-test and post-test. Okay. Design number 6 is the post-test only control group design. So essentially, we're taking design number 4 here, right above, and we're just removing the pre-test. Okay. So we randomize people into one of two groups. Then we give one group treatment. The other group doesn't get any treatment, and we do post-tests only. Okay. Let's move on to the quasi-experimental designs. Okay. So let's say for whatever reason we can't do a randomization. Okay. This one then it's number 10 in Stanley and Campbell. It's the non-equivalent control group design. Okay, so in this one you can't randomize, but you do have a control group. In the design, you're going to give both groups. I'm going to pause real quick for that loud announcement. Okay, so within this design, you have two groups. You're going to give you're going to give both groups a pretest. One group is going to receive treatment, and then you'll do post-tests on each group. There's a dashed line there to give you a heads up that the groups are not equivalent, or if we state that in other words, the groups are not randomized. Okay. The next one is it's the separate sample pre-test, post-test design. Okay, so this one was a little more complex, but essentially, when you have like a large population and you can't control for everybody getting treatment or not, you can control when people get treatment. Okay. So the way that you do this is you randomize people into two groups. All right. So we have our randomization here. One group so essentially if they're part of a school, we're hoping that those two groups are somewhat equivalent, even though they're separate samples. Okay. So we're going to give one group a pre-test, and then they'll get the treatment. And then the other group, we won't do a pre-test, but we'll do a treatment and then do a post-test. And the reason we might do something like this is because we're concerned that by giving the people the pre-test, it's going to have an effect on the outcome that we would see in the observation. Okay. So it's trying to control for the internal validity, the threat of measurement. So this one is a little trickier, where we take the one above, and then we have another group that is similar but not randomized from the previous group. Okay, and that the top two groups will receive the treatment, the bottom two groups won't receive the treatment. Okay, that one's a little complex for me. Maybe we can talk about that one a little bit more. All right, the recurrent institutional cycle design, or sometimes it's also called the patched up design. This is the most difficult one that there is to understand. Essentially, it was developed by the Campbell and McCormick when they were trying to study the attitudes on to authority that people would have going through Air Force Academy. Okay. And the problem is they had a number of problems, but they were trying to figure out how do we control for all the threats to validity that could come up, because going through Air Force Academy is a 13 month process, I think they said. And during that time, a lot could change. There could be something that's happening in the external world that is changing people's attitudes towards authority over that period. And we would have trouble picking that up in any of the other experimental designs. So here's what they figured out. They had Class A here. So let's say Class A is going into school in 1950, okay? So Class A goes through school in 1950. They get the treatment. So Air Force Academy is the treatment. They come out afterwards and they have a post-test, okay, that they use as to measure their attitudes towards authority. At the same time, and this would be around 1951 now, we have another class that's about to go through Air Force Academy. They're just starting Air Force Academy. So as we're observing this class ending, we can now observe Class B starting, and we simply take this observation here that's a pre-test for Class B, but we'll also use it as a pre-test for Class A. Essentially, we're assuming that Class A and Class B are somewhat similar in their attitudes to authority at that given time, if the only thing that's different is how they've gone through, whether or not they've gone through Air Force Academy. Okay? So the best example that I can think for this to give you to give you a real life scenario is let's say the year is 2011 and we have Class A going through Air Force Academy. They go through Air Force Academy and they graduate in 2012. Okay. In that year, oh no, let's say it's, crap, I've screwed this up. Let's say the year is 2016, 2015, okay? Air Force Class A goes through the Air Force Academy, comes out in 2016, okay? And we observe them here. But what's happened right before that is that President Trump has been elected. That might significantly impact the results of their attitudes to authority that has no impact on what Air Force Academy did to their attitudes to authority, okay? But Class B would have experienced the same thing, so we could then observe them at the same time in 2016 and kind of pull that measurement over as a pre-test for Class A. And then we would be able we'd see Class B then go through the Air Force Academy and see their differences to the post-test there. And so we'd be able to compare O2 to O1 and then O2 to O3 in a sense to get an idea how much is our actual treatment affecting the outcomes, okay? And this can get pretty complex because you can continue to have more classes going through. So you can then have like Class C go through, where you would have like an O4 down here treatment, and then O5. So it can get pretty intense there. So if we go to our question, so I'm going to scroll down to our question here. Our sample scenario says, your counseling unit runs a clinical mental health program with 2 tracks. You have on-campus full-time in person and off-campus hybrid. Gosh, these announcements are killing me at the moment, but I want to make sure I got this in. Okay, so we got the on-campus versus the off-campus. The dean wants to know if on-campus or off-campus students better learn career theory. Okay, so let's go up to our designs, all right? So in our designs, what we need to think about is there's no way to randomize people into the hybrid class versus the on-campus class. Okay, people are going to choose those on their own. So any design that has randomization is not going to work, if that makes sense. Okay, because they just can't be randomized. So we're either looking at a pre-experimental design, because those don't have any randomization, or we're looking at a quasi-experimental design. We instantly throw out the true experimental designs because they have randomization, okay? So the first one that we could use is we could use the static group comparison. We could say that we're going to have one group which we would call the treatment group, which would be the on-campus people, and we would say the non-treatment group would be the hybrid class, and they would be the static group comparison. And essentially we're seeing, does the treatment of being on campus versus kind of the non-treatment of being off campus have a effect on and the O's here would be our knowledge, the knowledge of career theory and DSM nomenclature, however you're going to measure that, okay? But if we want to get a little more sophisticated with it, we could do a quasi-experimental design. And just to give you a heads up, in this scenario here, we don't give any pretest. We don't test them on their DSM nomenclature and career theory before they go through the classes. So we might have a scenario where the people going through the on-campus program are already experts in career theory and DSM nomenclature and they tend to choose the on-campus program because of that, and so that's significantly going to affect our results, but we don't know because we don't do any pretest. However, and I guess that's one design that we could do if we wanted to. Okay, the next one is that we have the non-equivalent control group design. Okay, so non-equivalent groups, we have on-campus versus hybrid. They're not equivalent because we're not randomizing. This announcement, I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but I'm gonna stop talking as that's going. So we have two different groups here. Okay, they're not randomized. For each group, the group that's going through the on-campus program and the group that's going through the hybrid program, we can test their knowledge of DSM nomenclature at the beginning and career theory at the beginning, and then see how treatment favors, and then test them afterwards. Okay, and that would give us a better understanding of whether or not the on-campus or hybrid program has a better impact on their knowledge. The issue with this is then we have the problem that there might be some testing effect where, because they were tested beginning on DSM nomenclature and career theory, that might have an impact on the results afterwards. Okay? If we wanted to get really fancy, we could come down here. And the way that we would design this is we would have a Class A and a Class B for the hybrid program, for the on-campus program, and then we would have essentially a Class A and a Class B for the on-campus program, and essentially compare those two groups against each other. So we would, let's say we would have a say Class A starts the on-campus program in 2012. Okay, they would go through the program and they graduate in 2014, and we observe their knowledge of DSM nomenclature and career theory there. Class B is on the on-campus program as well, but they start in 2014 and then go through and graduate in 2016, and we test their knowledge. We do a pre-test and then a post-test there. Then down here, we would have another Class A and Class B for the hybrid program, and we would give them the treatment, have them go through the program, and then test their DSM nomenclature. So Class A doesn't get a pre-test, they just get a post-test. And then Class B of the hybrid program would get the pre-test and the post-test. The reason I use the years 2012 to 2014 is the DSM-5 came out right in 2013, which might significantly change up their knowledge of DSM nomenclature and the results, because there's a major change in DSM nomenclature during that time. But this design would help to fight against that. Essentially, what Cass said is go with the easiest design that would work. So this is an easy design here, the non-equivalent control group design that would work, but even easier, you could just do the static group comparison. You don't need to give anybody a pretest. You can just give them a post-test. You do need to talk about the threats to validity that would work there, but it's still a somewhat valid research design that you could use. It takes the least amount of time and would give the dean the quickest results, although we would have to state that they're maybe not the best results. Okay, so that's essentially all the experimental designs that we have. We have the one-shot case study. We have the one group pre-test, post-test design. We have the static group comparison. We have our true experimental designs, the pre-test, post-test control group. We have the post-test only control group, okay? We have and then we have the quasi-experimental designs. We have the non-equivalent control group design. We have the separate sample pre-test, post-test design. We have the separate sample pretest, post-test control group design. And we have the patched up or institutional cycle design. Okay. I hope that was helpful. If people have questions or clarifications, or if I made any mistakes or errors, please hit me back with those. I also will upload a recording of James and I going over stuff, especially this institutional cycle design, because that one's a bit tricky. Okay. All right. I hope this finds you all well.